fairly loud voice, so hopefully everyone can hear me. Wave if you don't. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very, very much indeed. I'm delighted to be here. I think my last visit was probably a couple of years back now, so very timely, and thank you for inviting me. If I could just start with a short anecdote, and apologies if you heard this before. Apologies also if I get the religious terminology wrong. I'll just show my ignorance. But Brother Peter decides to join a silent order of monks. And on day one, he's introduced to Father John. And Father John says, Brother Peter, you've joined this silent order. You know the rules. You cannot speak at all. But once a year on the anniversary of your joining, I'll call you to me. And you can say 2 words. Now, off you go, and God be with you. So a year passes, and 12 months to the day, he's summoned to see Father Peter. And Father Peter says, 12 months on, you have 2 words, what would you like to say? And Brother John ponders for a long time, and eventually says, bed hard. And Father Peter is rather perturbed by that, but eventually says, well, I hear you, I'll see what I can do about it. Now, off you go, God be with you. A further year passes, and he's summoned again to Father Peter, who says, you know the score, you can now say 2 words to me. And Brother John ponders, but not quite so long this time, and says, food awful. And Father Peter's now quite perturbed by this, but he thinks about it and says, well, okay, I hear you again, we'll see what we can do. Off you go, God be with you. A further year passes, and he's summoned again. And Father Peter says, blah, 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 you know the score now, you have 2 words to say to me, off you go. And immediately Brother John responds, I quit. At which point Father Peter responds immediately, well, it's probably just as well, you've done nothing but complain. And I tell you that one partly because I actually quite enjoy telling it, and it's quite a nice joke. But actually for me it also in some ways sums up part of the role of Age Concern Havering, because without stereotyping, many older people don't like to complain and make a fuss. And I'd like to think that Age Concern Havering is the voice for them in many of those instances. But I have to say in many of those instances, they may not make a fuss, but they'll, sure as eggs are eggs, vote with their feet ultimately. So politicians beware the older vote. Okay, at the risk of boring you slightly, just to say something about the national economy. And the impact on us. I think we're all aware of the difficulties in the national economy at the moment. What is very, very clear is that that's going to have an impact sooner or later on what's happening locally, and it's going to have an impact on local authorities and health locally sooner or later. And it's quite interesting at the moment, and we do tend to go through this from year to year, but every year around about December time we put in our bids to the local authority, and particularly to social services, for funding for some of our services. And that's meant to be for the year beginning 1st of April. And every year, round about March time, we finally hear, well, what is it today, 23rd of April, and we still haven't heard. And that's not just for us, that's for every local voluntary sector organisation. There is no decision about the funding. And I have to say, part of you starts to wonder, well, what's going on here? We hear all the reasons and the excuses, but is there something going on here that's linked to the pressures on the local economy? Because the other thing that's probably worth saying is that, again, as we all know, national government have got to balance this budget from somewhere. And as we saw yesterday, some of it supposedly is going to come from the taxpayer. But actually the easiest thing in the world is to pass the buck and actually pass the burden on to local authorities. So what we don't know yet is what the impact of that will be. The chances are the real impact will be next year onwards, but undoubtedly there are going to be pressures locally, and there will be pressures on local authorities and local health services to cut. Having said that, there may well also be pressures on local authorities and local health services to contract services out, on the basis that those services can probably be provided cheaper, hopefully more effectively as well, but nevertheless cheaper. So it's going to be quite interesting over the next period. I think for organisations like Age Concern Havering, some of our grants may well come under pressure, but equally we could well be looking or asked to tender for local services that have previously been provided by health or social care. And without wishing to get too political or nasty, I think what's very clear is from our side, we can almost certainly provide services cheaper than the local authority, because probably everyone in the whole world can. I don't just mean Havering Council, I mean any council. But actually, if we can do it, and if we believe we have a niche, and if we think we can do it well, and if we think we're being offered the right amount of money to do it, and not just simply the cheap alternative, then we will look to do it. So the chances are in 2 or 3 years' time, the likes of Concern Havering could be a lot smaller. Equally, they could be a lot larger. So it's quite interesting times, and a bit of a watershed for all of us. There's something at the moment out there called the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. That's the last bit of jargony, bureaucratic waffle you'll hear from me today, I promise. But it is something that the local health service, public health department in particular, have been working on. And it is basically a snapshot of this borough, its demographics, the issues that the borough is going to face, and really a foundation for planning of services. And I'm sure those of you in the connected to health in some way probably know something about this already, so forgive me. But what it is showing even more clearly than at any time in the 4 years I've been doing this job is that this borough doesn't just have a large older population, and probably in proportion terms the largest older population of any London borough, but because of the makeup of our population, because of the numbers of the population in the 50 to 70 age range, the growth of our older population is going to be even more significant and marked. Probably over the next 15 years, the number of about 85-year-olds plus are going to increase by 50%, and probably even double in the next 30 years. And there are going to be knock-on effects right the way across the board. It is going to cause issues in terms of frailty. There are going to be lots more older people in this borough living longer, but with long-term illnesses and conditions. There is going to be an awful lot more dementia. There are going to be a lot more instances of depression. And there are going to be a lot more needs placed on family carers, who are already picking up quite a burden already. And I apologise if that sounds somewhat depressing, but it's a stark reality, and starker than I've ever seen. And it's something that Havering needs to wake up to. And actually they are. I think we've all known that there's been issues in this borough about age for some time, but I participate in something called the Havering Strategic Partnership, which on the whole does actually achieve quite a lot. It's made up by representatives of the council, senior level, I'm talking about the leader of the council and the chief executive, the local health service, fire brigade, police, you name it. And that body, courtesy of this analysis, is taking things very seriously indeed. Probably we should all have woken up before, but everyone really is awake now and is well aware that a lot more has got to be done. So watch this space, because unless a lot does happen in terms of planning older people's services here, there are not just going to be problems, there are going to be massive problems, and far more so in Havering than pretty much anywhere else. And just before I come to Concern Havering, if I could also just mention Concern and Help the Aged. Some of you may be aware from the press that there has been a merger. Indeed there has. As of 1st of April, Concern England and Help the Aged merged. For want of a better name, while they think about a different name, the new charity is called Concern and Help the Aged. But there will be a new name, a new identity, hopefully not at the cost of multi-million-pound budgets of advertising agencies, but over the course of the next 9 months, a new name and identity will be found. Personally, I think it's good. There have been two charities conflicting, confusing each other's roles for too long now. Hopefully this will mean both a rationalisation at London central level, a clearer focus, and actually the end result should be a much better deal and a much better campaigning body for older people. For us locally, Concern Havering has always been independent. It is independent now, it will remain independent. Sometime over the next 9 months they will come to us and say, this is what the new charity is going to be, do you want to be part of it, albeit as a continuing independent member? And we will look at that, and just for the sake of argument, if they come up with an inspirational new name like Age UK, for example, and I'm not saying that because that is an example, we will be offered the chance to be Age Havering. At that time, we will look at it and we will make a decision, we will consult, and we will make sure that what we do is right for older people in Havering. Our independence is guaranteed. We've actually put a lot of oomph into raising awareness about Age Concern Havering this year, which I don't want to lose, but clearly if the national name is backed up by quite a lot of support, then we probably want to be part of that. But we will remain independent. I think that's the key thing I want to say. We are Age Concern Havering, we're focused 100% on Havering, and every penny we raise goes back into Havering, and that will stay. Age Concern Havering is 60 this year. I hope many people here are aware of that, because we're certainly making a big splash about it. We're in the recorder with a page or a double page spread every week, and we're looking to raise a lot more awareness, and yes, we're also looking to raise funds. But the primary purpose of what we're doing is to make sure that everyone who needs to know about what we're doing is aware of us and where to turn to. I have several leaflets and flyers here you're very welcome to take away, but perhaps just a brief highlight of some of our key services. For anyone over 60, their families, anyone connected to them, we have a pretty comprehensive information, advice and advocacy service. So if you have any issues, things you need to know about services or anything to do with ageing, we can help. And if we can't help, we know someone who can. We also spend a lot of time working with the Department of Work and Pensions to ensure all older people who are entitled to benefits get them. Because there is a huge proportion of older people right the way across the country who do have entitlements who don't claim them. And I think it's key we do that. For those older people who are lonely and particularly housebound, we have a number of services, but particularly a befriending service. We have 60-odd trained, vetted volunteers who will go into older people's homes, have a cup of tea, a chat, give them some companionship, but actually also make sure that if there are other services they can link into, they know where to turn, and we can link them into those. We have elements of a home support service. We continue to run a trades list. We have a vetted list of recommended tradespeople that any older person or family can acquire from us, where we know the people on that list are reliable and honest and trustworthy. We do a lot of work with the fire brigade, doing fire assessments and putting in smoke alarms entirely for free for anyone over 60. Doesn't matter how vulnerable or lonely you are. If you're over 60, if you need a fire assessment check and a free smoke alarm, we'll do it, we'll fit it for you. And we also have the bottle in the fridge scheme, which I know we've done a lot of work with you guys on, and thank you very much for that. I have to say, I was going back over all the old statistics, and actually they're not as up to date as they should be, but we're pretty clear we've distributed several hundred in our time. It's difficult to put a precise figure on it. And also we know of, and that probably means there's many, many more times that, those we don't know about because we're not told, we know of over 20 instances where an individual has become sick. We're getting that information, and getting that information direct to the ambulance man or whoever it is has been pretty key. We also know of 3 instances where arguably it's been a matter of life and death, and having that information there has actually arguably saved a life. So for your help on that, thank you very, very much indeed. We also, just picking up on the salt issues earlier, we have a former practice nurse working with us who goes out into the community. She's currently at the Liberty Shopping Centre, amongst other places, doing blood pressure checks for free and offering healthy living and healthy eating advice, which is absolutely key. And I think for us, the most key part about it is by getting out into the community, she's doing checks for people who might not otherwise get along to their GP, might not otherwise be checked, might not otherwise find they've got a problem. And already along the way she's identified considerable numbers of people who have iffy to very, very poor blood pressure. By getting out there, we've actually identified some and hopefully preempted some very serious situations. We do daycare at Hopwell House in Hornchurch and Painsbrook in Harold Hill. We have a neighbourhood day service which takes the daycare idea out into the community, again at different venues, sheltered accommodation, whatever across the borough, and also an active living project which is funded by the big lottery, where we're trying to work much more closely with older people's groups to see how we can help them to do more, and then to fill in some gaps where we can identify geographical or other areas where not enough is happening. And we also have a very, very big service in dementia. I mentioned earlier about the growth in dementia. It is going to escalate dramatically. We have a service that offers, if you like, an early intervention and a middleman, if you like, between health service professionals and the client and the carer. And we will provide emotional support, practical support. We'll work particularly with the family carer, who actually in the more advanced stages of dementia is probably the person who most needs the support, to ensure they know what they're entitled to and that they're aware how the disease will take further effect and what can be done to help. And last but not least, we have various insurance products. Now, a quick show of hands. Who, if anyone, has an age concern insurance product here? My goodness me. Who, if anyone here, has ever had a quote from us about an age concern insurance product? 1, 2, 3. Okay, well, I'm not sure the ratio of free and no take-up is too good, but hopefully was it around price or something like that, maybe? Price? Yeah, price. Okay, all right. Well, what I would like to say to you is we have a range of insurance products, home and contents, travel, motor, car breakdown, and also do another number of other products like funeral plans, financial services, advice, equity release, all those sorts of areas. Now, we are not a high-pressure organisation. We believe most of our products are competitive on the whole, but they're not always competitive. They won't necessarily be the best for you. But next time, please, when any of your policies come up for renewal, talk to us. Get a quote from us. It may not be right for you, but at least talk to us and get a quote, and actually maybe it will be right. And the added benefit, apart from the fact that you can talk to a human being, not a call centre in some remote region of the world, the profits we make on that go back into supporting the work of the charity. So a number of good reasons to at least talk to us and get a quote. A little bit about funding, and then I'll draw things to a close. As a charity, we get about 50% of our money from the local authority, some of which is very specifically related to specific contracts like daycare. We get about a quarter of our funding from the Primary Care Trust, or NHS Havering, which particularly funds our dementia services. And then everything else we do, we have to find our own money. And we do that through a variety of routes. We sell insurance and the profits go back to support what we do. We have a shop in Hornchurch, our one charity shop so far, but again, if you're a charity shop, or indeed if you're clearing your wardrobe out from time to time, please do think of us, because we'll happily take whatever you've got. We fundraise, and indeed during the 60th birthday year we've actually started to do a lot more of that sort of thing, and it's probably something that we've never really done before, but we believe we have a story to tell, and we believe our services are worthy of support locally. And indeed we held our first ever ball, our diamond ball, on Saturday night at the Manor, and indeed one of your members here was here and I think had a jolly good time.
Yes,
Two, I do beg your pardon. So when that comes up again next year, maybe others of you might like to join us then. So in conclusion, how can you help us? Well, you already are, because you do things every year, whether it's bottle in the fridge, and certainly a lot of stuff at Christmas time, and we thank you deeply for that. That really is a major contribution. But there are other things individually you can do. You can volunteer. We have 250 odd volunteers across the organisation working in all sorts of roles, front end, back office, whatever, and they are absolutely essential. We could not do a quarter of the things we do without them. You could give personally. The Recorder campaign carries an ask and a voucher with it, and your contributions would be very, very welcome. You can join events, the event I've just talked about, or indeed various other events that are forthcoming. And again, I have some leaflets, but just as a run-through, we have a day trip to Cambridge on the 2nd of May. We have the Metropolitan Police Male Voice Choir coming to the Windmill Hall on the 23rd of September. If any of you haven't seen that choir before, they are extremely good. Very good evening. If anyone feels up to it, there's a 10 kilometre run in London in July, or indeed you can throw yourself off the YMCA on the 6th of September. attached to a rope. So lots of things you can do. If any of you know, either personally or by reputation, Hugh Dibbons, the former vicar of St Andrews, and he is one of our trustees. He's currently halfway up the Himalayas trekking for us, and he's seeking sponsorship, and there's a website you can get on and donate to him, and I'd say that's going extremely well. For those of you, and I'm sure this covers most of the gents here who buy flowers every week for other halves or lady friends or whatever, if you go into Molly's in Hornchurch to make your purchase and say Age Concern Havering, we will get 30% of your purchase price back to Age Concern Havering. And I have to say you get a jolly good service from Molly's, just a personal opinion. But Molly's Florist in Hornchurch, Billet Lane in Hornchurch. But most of all, I have to say, you can be ambassadors for us. You can actually spread the word about what we do, who to contact, and just talk to people, whether it's about things you can do to help or about the services we provide, because we're very, very conscious that there are still too many older people out there in this borough who no one is getting to, who are lonely, pretty much housebound, who aren't on any agency's radar. And that, most of all this year, we need to ensure doesn't happen, because in this day and age, we shouldn't, other than a choice of the individual, we should not have a world where there is loneliness, not unless people choose that. So that's our key aim for this year, and that's where you can most help. And thank you very much indeed for your time.